Welcome. In this tutorial I talk about the new node-based material system in Maxon Cinema 4D Release 20. As a great example, we will use this scene by the talented artist Jan G. Jan G is using Cinema 4D since his college time in 2004. He owns a production company and the only Chinese Maxon authorized training center. You'll find more information about him and his work on his website. Before we dive now into this tutorial, I want to make a brief introduction of myself. My name is Helge Maus and I'm a Maxon certified lead instructor. I work now since 18 years in the industry as a 3D and VFX trainer for my company Pixel Train. You'll find more information about me and my trainings on pixeltrain.de. So let's get started with the new node-based material system inside of Cinema 4D R20. Nodal material systems are really popular in third-party renderers and other 3D applications. So it was a feature request and now we have a full node-based material system. But on the downside of that, node-based material systems are sometimes a little bit complicated. And so it's really interesting and from my perspective, really good implemented inside of this release. So beside of the new node system, you also can use the old workflows if you like. And so we first take a brief look into the create menu here of our materials manager. You see that the old new material item here is still there. So if you like, you can work in the old school way, make a new material here, and you have your color channel, diffuse, and so on. The more modern approach is the reflectance workflow. And the reflectance workflow is used, for example, for ProRender, and also it's really useful if you work with a physical renderer and it's still there. So if you go here to the create menu, new PBR material, you will see that it looks like the old classic material system, but we are used to work completely here inside of the reflectance. So the diffuse amount is made here with the diffuse layer and the reflection layers here on top. So we don't use the legacy stuff, like I've explained, for example, in the tutorial about the ProRender workflow inside of a Cinema 4D. And now, additionally, we have the new node-based material system. If you want to have a node-based material, you normally go here into the create menu and take here new node material. And if you now make a double click, you see the new node editor opens and then you are in the world of the node-based materials. Keep in mind that this new material system is based on the reflectance workflow. So if you want to learn how to work effectively with this system, you first have to understand the reflectance workflow. So the things you find in the PBR material. But we talk about this later. Let's get started to understand what a node-based material system is. And for that, we can make this scene here a little bit simpler by switching over here to a stripped down version. You see here this cool preamp made by Jan G, and also here a floor which I've hidden here inside of my scene. We want to start here with the floor. It's a really simple floor. We have here a cloner object, and this cloner object here clones some cubes here as floor tiles, and we want to make here now a new node-based material. Go here to create. We say we want to have a new node material, and we can add it like before by dragging it here onto the cube. To see directly what happens, we can add here a preview renderer. So you remember that we have here this interactive render region, or you can press Option or Alt R on your keyboard. I tend normally to open this up in a new window. So I go here to Window, New Viewer Panel, and you can drag it here if you like. And then we can switch here into the camera with the cameras menu. I want to see the shot cam here. So we get the side direction of this camera here. And if you now want to open up an interactive render region here, make sure that this window here is selected, and then you can go here to interactive render region. It starts rendering here and then make it bigger. And on the right side here, you see this little triangle here. This is undersampling or quality. So if you drag it down, you see the image is a little bit blurred because it's undersampled. And if you have a beefy machine, you can drag it upwards and you get a better result for your first tests. Now we have a preview which we can work with. If you want to stop this preview rendering, I normally tend to click into this window and press Alt-R again on my keyboard, so this window vanishes. And if I want to start it again, I stay in this window, Alt-R, and this window remembers the size and also the quality, so I can stop and start this window here again. Let's dive into our new node-based material. Instead of the Materials Manager, if you double-click, it now opens up the node editor. And it looks really huge at the first start. And to make a short trip around, you will see that it's an extremely powerful node editor. It's not yet implemented for other regions inside of Cinema 4D, so Expresso is still the old editor. But you will see that this node editor is really a part of the future of Cinema 4D. So let's get around here. We have here in the middle our nodes or assets, and here we will normally bring our material together. The output of a material, so what lies on an object, is always a material node, and the rule is there only can be one material node. Sometimes this is a little pitfall, because if you import networks from the outside or you merge stuff, you sometimes have two or more material nodes, but only one material node is used. So get used to that. One material node is the output, and this here is, so to say, the most important part. All other stuff is connected to this material here. We will see that in a moment. On the left side here, we have three windows. One window here is a nodes window, which helps you to navigate in complicated node setups. If you want to select a node here, you can do this visually by clicking here on one of these nodes, or you can look here into the names and click here. So really easy to navigate here. Then we have this little info panel here, which helps you to understand which type of node you have here. And we have over 150 nodes or assets here inside of this node editor in the moment. And so it's really important that you understand which kind of asset do you have. You can name the assets here by double-clicking and name it somehow, for example, diffuse. But the type of this node is still here. You see, it's a BSDF asset in the moment. So, like I've said, really, really useful. Then we have here the pool of all the assets which are installed at the moment in your system, and we have categories which you can use here, really nice. And if you want to search for a node, you can click here on this area here. You see it highlights and there's a little spyglass here, and if you click, you can enter a search string. For example, you search for, let's say, a gradient, and if you start typing, you see that this system now searches for the word gradient or the use of gradients here in the list, and you can find here something. If you want to use it, drag it over into your graph, and if you want to get rid, delete it with the keyboard. Don't forget to get rid of this search filter here. Then we have the right side here, and the right side is like a separate attributes manager. So if you work in this node editor, this here is your attributes manager most of the time. And like in other attributes manager, we have tabs here, so you can open them separately, or you can hold down the shift key to open up everything if you like. You also have here previews. If you want to change them, right mouse button click. You know this from the material system. On the left side, we see the preview of the node which we have selected. On the right side, we see the output of the material, so you see it in context, how it looks. And then we have here our options. We will use them a lot, so we don't have to talk too much about this. Then we have here a little menu. We have a create menu where you can add more materials. You can make groups and assets. It's a more advanced topic. Then we have the edit menu where we can cut, copy, duplicate, delete, and all this stuff. And the most important tool from my perspective here inside of the node editor, the nodes commander. So if you search for a node here, you can do it with a filter, but you know from other cases inside of Cinema 4D that with Shift-C you can have a commander. So if you want to model, for example, and you press Shift-C, you can tell here, for example, I want to use a knife or whatever you want to use here. But inside of the node editor, we are not interested in all the commands Cinema 4D has. We are only interested in the nodes, and so you use the keyboard shortcut C here, and you see exactly a representation of this asset menu here, and there you can search. There's a really useful feature inside of this filter which I don't want to forget to tell you. Finding nodes is the most complicated part in a node-based system. There are so many nodes for special purposes. And for example, you want to layer something and you don't remember if there is a layer or blend or whatever. If you enter, for example, blend, you will see that not only the blend node comes up, but also the layers node, or here the mix node, because all of these nodes are able to blend something, and so this search here is really intelligent. If you, for example, want to use a layer mode, multiply, for example, multiply is a math operation, so you get here a math node, but you also find it here in the word pre-multiply and unpre-multiply, and also again in the layers, because you can use it as a layer mode, or also in the blend node. So a really useful search function here, and the keyboard shortcut C is something we use all the time. Let's talk a little bit about these nodes here. In my introduction, I told you that the whole node-based system is using the reflectance workflow. If you now take a look here on the right side on the material, and I only open you here the inputs and the previews, so I hold down Shift and open these two only for you, you will see that you have here in the moment a diffuse layer. So if this here is the material, I've selected the material node, you see a diffuse amount, which gives you here the diffuse gray surface. You have emissions, you can have alphas, transparency, normals, and displacement. So this is like a material editor here. And the whole amount of diffuse reflection is hosted in this diffuse layer. And if you now select this diffuse layer here, you see that a sub-editor opens to show you the diffuse layer. And this here is exactly the same stuff you see here. That's the input here of the BSDF layer. So if you want to change now, for example, the color of this sphere, you can use here the color chooser. I open this up and I want to tell the system, okay, I want, for example, to use an orange color here, or orange yellow, and you see you get instantly here the change, and it's also done here because it is originally done here. This sub is named inputs, and so it means the input of this layer. If you now want to have a next layer, for example, you want to have a reflection on it, and like I've said, it's depending on the reflectance workflow. You need normally, if you are in a reflectance channel, another layer which adds, for example, a Beckman or GGX to it. You go here now to add, or you can use this little triangle here. And if you use add, I do this for a moment, you see here a new BSDF layer here happens now. But this layer here isn't connected. It's only added here to the system. So you need an input on this side here. So I remove it for a moment and do it in one step. Instead of clicking add here, which only adds a layer, I click here on this little triangle. And now I can decide what I want to add. I can add a utility, or I want to add a surface information. And there are two options. I can add an emission. It's like a luminance channel, or I can add a BSDF here. And a BSDF is the reflection on the surface here. If you add this, you have two diffuse layers in the moment. And you will see here on the left side, in this node editor that we have now 2 diffuse nodes, and every of these node is named a BSDF. That's the reason why I told you sometimes it's really useful to look into this info panel so that you can see what it is. We have a diffuse amount, so we don't need another diffuse here. I want to switch now the appearance of this here, and a BSDF can be one of many BSDF types. And if you select now this node, you see here in this list many types, and these types are the same types you normally find in the reflectance channel. So you can have a diffuse, you can have a Beckman, GGX, Phong, Watt, anisotropy. We use, for example, now a GGX here. And now you will see that the node itself outputs a perfect reflection, and the whole material also outputs a perfect reflection. Why is that? Select the material again. You see here the diffuse layer, and you have here the GGX, and the GGX has an opacity of this layer of 100%. So you can lower this, and you see you get an opacity mix of these two. This is one way of working. But what if I want to make something physically correct? Normally, reflections are side dependent. So you know the law of Fresnel, and we want to use, instead of an absolute value here, Fresnel. So for this, I can select the node itself here and only see the node options, or I can work from this point on. I select here the GGX layer and get here my mini attributes manager, and I tell GGX here is absolutely okay, but what I want to do is I want to add a Fresnel here. And we have 2 types of Fresnel here, conductor or dielectric. Conductors are for metals, and dielectric is for everything what is not a metal. So I select dielectric, and now I can use a preset if you're used to, so you can open this up, and if you want to have something custom, you can open here on the left side and tell the system, okay, I want to use, for example, 1.5 or whatever. And now you see the mix is correct. So this is the Fresnel. If you now want to lower or increase the whole reflection and still use Fresnel for the correct side-dependent reflection, you can lower it here or increase it here. The next thing we normally do is we talk about roughness. We can tell here how rough the whole surface is, and so on. If you look into this, you see it's like the reflectance, but it looks a little bit better. So it's also useful that you name your layers here by double-clicking, and you can now stack these layers on each other if you like. You can add more and more layers here. I want to demonstrate this now in a more useful example. So we want now to build this floor with a little bit more complicated material. Let's add a new node-based material here. I name it floor, and I replace my yellow test material here. And then we can dive into the system like we've done before. And to make it a little bit easier for me to work at the same time, I rearrange here some windows. So I drag the materials manager here on to the right. I don't use in the moment here the coordinates manager. Attributes manager I can bring back. And then we make us a little bit space here. If you want to get rid here on the left or right something, you have here these little buttons here, but I think it will work here for our material. What I want to do is I want to demonstrate you how to work in a classic setup. So first we want to have, instead of a diffuse color here, we want to use a texture. And if you now take a closer look here to these options here, I've selected the diffuse amount here. You see that we have here these little squarey dots here. And these dots are attributes connectors. If you want to connect something here, you can do it here visually, or you can click here on these dots. I want to load a texture into the color information of my diffuse layer. So I click here on this attribute dot, and you see in this little pop-up, we can now connect a pre-existing node here. We can go through all the nodes or an existing node here. We can connect textures, which are loaded inside of the scene, and we can load a texture from our hard drive. So this is the thing I want to do. I click load, and I've prepared here a JPEG here with a concrete floor, and I press open. I don't want to copy this over. It's okay. It's the same like before. And if you now take a look here, you see Cinema 4D was now so nice for me to add an image node here. So if you select this here, you see the asset is an image node. This is the loader node for us. And the output of this node now is delivered into the color information of this diffuse channel, which delivers its output then here to the BSDF layer. Now, naming would be great. Diffuse is clear for me. If you want, you can select this here, make a double click on the name, and I remove the one I don't like it. And then I go here to this node here, make a double click here on the name, and instead of the JPEG name, I name it concrete so that I know what I have here now. And if we now take a look here through our renderer, we see we have now placed our concrete here. If you want to change something about the image, for example, you want to change the layer set and so on, you see this here is an old image node which we had in the normal material editor inside of Cinema 4D. That's nice. The next thing we now need is some kind of reflection. So I go back here to my material, and you know now how it works. I go here to Surface, BSDF, I name it GGX, and we also have to change here the layer type to GGX, so we get a wonderful reflection. But in this reflection now we want to have it dielectric. I tell the system here that I want to use 1.3 here, and it looks now really reflective in the moment. It's too nice for a concrete floor. You can increase now the roughness if you like, but we have here this information also. So we can use this as an image. So if you want now, for example, to load a spec map, a specular map, you can decide, okay, normally it's in the reflectance color. So click here, this little button again, load the texture here, and here's the spec map, which I want to use. I click here on open. No, I don't want to do that. And so now you see that the spec map now is used, and we get rid of these crazy reflections. We only have them in really smart parts because of this here. We also can use, if we like, here this original concrete if we like. How to do that? I remove this spec map for a moment here, and instead of that I want to use here the same image. And if you look now to the inputs here, you see that we have different colors going on here. If you have here, for example, a yellow color, which means you have RGBA data coming. If you want to have here gray scale images or only float values, you can use here the gray ones. If you have vectors, you use here this purple ones. And yeah, the whole material layers, the whole BSDF layers are green here on this side here. So you see you will have a color code, and normally Cinema 4D tries to convert them correctly. Otherwise, we find conversions here if you like. But in our case, we can tell, okay, use this here, and then we can drag here a new pipe out. So you go over this dot here and drag it over and connect it here. And now it uses this value here as the color. But you see, the feedback is not so good, because this here is really, really bright. And bright means more reflections. So we want to change the color appearance here. And this is the big advantage now of this system here. We can ask, for example, for a color manipulation, and we find here under colors a whole bunch of color manipulations, and one of them is the color correction. We can add now this node to this stream and we can rebuild this tree. So if you want to reconnect something, you can take here this pipe and drag it somewhere else, for example here, and then drag this here in. But you also can insert something. So I deleted the node again. We know that we need color correction. You can make a right mouse button click on this line here and say, I want to insert a converter from the colors, and this is a color correction node. And there it is. So it's inserted. And also a nice side note, if you delete something here, you see the connection will not break. So really good thing. And if you drag it directly over a line, you will see that your mouse cursor changed, and if you drop it then, it also connected this. I want to change now the appearance of this here to black and white. So if we select this node here, now you see why these previews are really useful. On the right side, you see the material. On the left side, you see the node itself, so the output of the node. And now we can change here the saturation. We remove the whole saturation, and now we see the output of this node and also the material in context. If you now want to do more, you can add the next node. For example, you want to change the contrast and so on. Here's a contrast node. But in my case, I want to show you a little bit more about this node graph here. You have a bigger node graph now, so this navigator here comes in use. This is nice. Also, remember that you can select the nodes here if you want to jump around, and press the S key for show me the selected thing. So if you press S, you see this node graph jumps to the selection, the same like in the viewport. So it's really like Cinema 4D. That's nice. And you also can deactivate, for example, the previews here in the nodes. There's a little tick here on the left side, so you can get rid of these previews if you want to have more space. And you have really often a whole bunch of open ports which you don't need. For example, you say, for the color correction, it's absolutely enough that I only see the color. So select this node, and here you have 3 different kind of representation of the ports of the selected node, or for all the nodes you have in your graph. Depends on your selection. Show me everything, show all ports, or show me only the connected ports, or show me nothing, only that there is a connection. This helps you now to get rid of all the clutter. Now we can also remove the preview here. If you have a big graph here and you want to get rid of this messy style, you can use here the 2 layout options, layout the selected, or layout everything. And you see Cinema 4D tries its best to lay out this. Okay, so these are the 2 options for that here. And now we can go back here, make it rougher if we like, and make a test render. What if I want to use now a bump map or a normal map? For this, we can use the same image, or we can load something. First, use the same image. How to add a bump map? The bump map is something which happens on the material itself, but you see there is no bump input here. And the reason for this is we use in this workflow only normal maps. But don't be afraid, you don't have to convert every bump map now to a normal. It works really easy for you in this system. Instead of using a normalizer to convert it, I use a bump map asset here. You see it's under surface, and if you drag this over now, it wants to have a value, so a color image, which you want to use. For example, I say take the same here, or we can tell no, I want to have the black and white information. So open this up, I remove this here, and I tell the system take this here in this node. Another useful thing, I go out with escape. If you have closed all the nodes and you want to connect something, connect it here to this preview image or to the node, and then Cinema 4D opens you a little dialog where you can decide where you want to place this line. And I want to use it in value. And you see in this bump map now, it's converted to normals for you. You have here strength, you have the UV epsilon and 3D epsilon like you had before. And then we can output this again. We don't have outputs in the moment because I hided all the ports, but the same thing again. I take this normal port, place it over here, this image, and you see we can directly address the result, or you open it up and directly take the result here. So this is the way a bump map works here. So if you come now closer, you see here are the bumps, and we can render this. And now you see here's the bump on your surface. And if you want to change the strength or make it negative, you can do it here like you normally do it in the normal material system of Cinema 4D. So this is the bump map. I have prepared a normal map for this concrete so that you also can see how I work with normal maps. So get rid of this here and get also rid of this line here. It doesn't make sense. For this, I take an image node, load into the image node my map here. Here it is. And if you want to see the output of only one node without waiting for the calculation of everything here, you see, normally we only see here in the rendering on the viewport the output of the material because this material is assigned here. There's another really useful option here. And this is the solo button here in every node. So if you solo something, you directly see the solo on your object. In a normal map, it doesn't make too much sense sometimes if you want to place this here a little bit better. But yeah, if you want to see, for example, here the grayscale image, you can click here on the solo and then you see it here in grayscale. If you want to get rid and see the material again, don't forget to deactivate the solo again, so you see again the output of the material. I've loaded here my normal map, and then I take a normal asset, not the normalizer. This is not the thing we are after. We search under surface again. This is the normal map, and we take the result of this here, take it to the normal map. You see the options you know from Cinema 4D, so the preset for the space and flipping of the axis and so on. And then we have a vector which you can use here, for example, in the GGX itself, if you only want to have the normals here on the reflection. But in my case, I want to use it here on the material completely. And so we have now here our normals connected. That's it for the floor. You see a really useful setup here. If you are finished now, you can lay out everything so that it looks a little bit better, and then we see each other in the next step. Meanwhile, I have exchanged the material for the floor to this wooden surface here, which the artist Yang Ge has used. And this wooden surface is a really nice example how you can use all these great nodes which the Maxon team has built into this system here. You will see here in this material here a really easy setup, so let us analyze it. We start here on the material node, and you see we have a diffuse layer and a GGX layer. And I don't want to see the GGX in the moment, so I deactivate this. And if you now select the diffuse layer, you see that the diffuse itself here uses in the color a wood shader. Okay, you can now click here onto the wood, or you can select directly the wood shader here. This wood shader is one of the many assets which the Maxon team has given you here in this asset system. If you select the wood shader here, and you can name it with the German name Holz or whatever, you still can see the name of the original asset here in this info. You see it's wood, and if you now take a look here to wood, you see it's under generators. And if you now take a look under the generators, you see a whole bunch of really great pre-built assets. You have a basic noise, basic gradients, but also complex things like a complex noise, for example, edges masks, flake generators, gradients, landscape masks. This is something we know from the other material system, multi-shader from MoGraph, pattern generators, which are great, and rock surface, and so on. And also there is a wood shader. It's named here utility because it's built here with other nodes. And if you now want to select this here and want to change it, you can now play with this. One side note at this point here, in opposite of the Cinema 4D normal material workflow where we have alpha channel separate, we deliver here through these yellow lines not only RGB but RGBA. So you will see that, for example, here a color selector, for example in this gradient here, not only delivers you, if I open this here, the color here, but also alpha information. So this is sometimes useful to know. Okay, I've shown you here how the wood works. This is easy, but here is another really useful asset which the Maxon team has given you. Scratches. Also this here is under the generator. It's a scratch generator, and it generates here grayscale or float informations, and this here is used now in the intensity of the GGX, and the GGX is rough. And if we now go into the layer, we can see it complete. And if you want to see it, here are the scratches. Only the scratches. You remember that you can tick here the solo key, so we get the whole output of GGX, the reflections with the scratches. You see them here now, or you can also solo only the scratches, and here are the scratches. So this is the original flow material. Let's go on here after we have built now our floor, and we want to now add the preamp. I removed here some materials for you so that we can now work with these in the new system. Let's start now here with these knobs here. What I want to do is I need only a nice looking metal on these knobs here. You can build your metal by yourself. So if I deactivate this for a moment. If you want to do that, we go here, new node-based material. I name it metal and place it here. Go here, press the S key. It's now here, so I place it here on the complete object here. And to do a metal, it's really easy. Metal normally don't have a diffuse amount or really low, so we can get rid of this layer here, diffuse, remove. Instead of this, we need something reflective. We take a BSDF layer, say this would be later GGX, and then I select here GGX from this. Now it's fully reflective here. See this here, but it's still no metal, it's only black here. So I go then to the Fresnel and select conductor here. And now we get a metal. And in this conductor here, you can now select a preset. For example, I want to use silver at this point, and then we can increase the roughness a little bit. If we now press the renderer here again, you will see that they look now like metal, but we don't have scratches and so on. And at this point, you will see that the node-based system makes much work for you. So you have to add now stuff and so on. And the nice thing behind the scene here is that many of these assets are groups, which are then converted to assets. And you can propagate ports and you can reuse them. In a team, you can versionize them and all other crazy stuff you need in big scenes. To help you to get started with this, Maxon has given you predefined assets. And if you take here a look into the create menu again, you see there is a new Uber shader. The Uber shader, which you have here, looks on the first sight a little bit like the normal Cinema 4D material. But if you take a closer look, you see beside of diffuse and reflection, we have a coating here. So we have other layers. And if you look now here under Node Editor, there's a button, and you click here, you will see that this Uber material is an asset, a pre-built asset, which really works like node material because it's a node material, but you get a nice user interface where everything is propagated. And if you want to see what's behind this Uber material, you can make a right mouse button click here and click here on Edit the Asset. And then you see this material from the inside. So it's really built for you so that you can use it directly. But if you want to understand how the system works, you can dive into these pre-built assets. To get out of this asset mode here, go to the Create menu inside of the Node Editor and quit here the Edit Asset mode. And if it asks you if it's okay to lose all the changes, you say, yes, it's okay. It was only an example. So I get rid of the Uber shader here. If we go again into the Create menu, you see here that we also have node materials, a whole bunch of presets here. And for our case, we need metal. So I take this metal preset. And if we click this, or make a double click here to get the materials editor, you see a really nice metal material. Easy to work with and physically accurate. That means I can go here now to a bluish tint here if I like. Then I go here to the metal I want to have, for example, silver. You can then select a finish if you like, for example, polished. And so I have now my metal and I can use it directly here on my buttons without rebuilding them. And I've prepared this for you so you can see how this here is used. The next material I want to build is here this plate here. To build this, I've also prepared here my material. I bring it up here and you see we have here these nice anisotropic patterns going on here. And the reason for this is that if you dive into this material now, you will see it's a metal, so only an anisotropic layer. You can add here your BSDF. Select here then under BSDF anisotropic, same like in the reflectance channel, that's it. But for the roughness here, a range mapper is used. And if you go this path through the range mapper here a little bit farther, you see we used a noise here, a Perlin noise. We stretched it in the X direction really, really strong so that we get here these nice stripes. The range mapper converts the colors from black and white, which is the output of the noise, to this little bit of a tinted gray and white, and then the anisotropic is used to make this really nice look here. To get now the labels onto this metal here, we can take another material. You can still use the material stacking here in the object manager. So I prepared here a label material, which I can add now. So you get here the labels. And if you dive into it with a double click here, you will see that it's a really easy approach. Here you see the use of the alpha channel the first time. It's the same like in the classic Cinema 4D material. If you input a black and white image here to the alpha, it looks like that here. White where the text is, black where you don't want to see this material. Then you get a mask here for this material. And on the diffuse reflection here, you will see that here's only a color for the labels here. And the alpha channel here looks a little bit crazy, but under the hood it's really simple. You will see that, let's try to sort this a little bit. Okay, now it looks better. It starts normally here with this PNG. In this PNG you see this is the whole label setup. And to layer up now more than one layer, we use one of two nodes. There's a blend node in the system. Blend node can work with a foreground and a background and a blend amount here if you like. Or if you want to use the old known layer node from the Cinema 4D material, you see it looks like in the normal material. You can use here a layer node, and this is used here at this point. You see here's the image which is used with multiply, because everything which is black is removed. If you multiply something, white stays, and underneath that we have again scratches, and over that we have a little bit of noise, so it looks a little bit more used. And yeah, that is the use here of the layering of the system. That's it for this first introduction to the node-based material system inside of Cinema 4D R20. I hope it was useful and you understand now these setups a little bit better. If you want to learn more, please take a look into the predefined materials which Maxon has provided you, also into the content browser and Cineversity. My name is Helge Maus from Pixel Train. Have fun.